Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining to today's webinar about recording documents on blockchain and proof on blockchain. So, I am Johannes Schweifer, and I'm one of the early movers in what has become known as the Crypto Valley in Switzerland here. So I was already working with Bitcoin before Crypto Valley was even established. I'm one of the co-founders of Bitcoin Swiss and co-founder of a number of other blockchain startups. And my background is actually a chemist, so I'm an engineer. I tend to not just believe, but to have proof. So that's the starter for today. So talking about today's topic, I will start with the barrier between worlds, and then how to record documents on blockchain, and the reason why to do so, and finally the power of linking assets, linking documents with each other. And afterwards, there is a time reserved for you to ask some questions and me to give some answers. So the barrier between worlds is something really crucial, something people don't often understand, and there's a lot of debate around it. Last time, for example, the topic was the intrinsic value of Bitcoin. And it's a difficult topic, especially because when trying to describe something which is purely digital with the viewpoint of somebody who is, of course, existing in the real world, trying to touch things, to smell things, then it just will not work the original way. It needs some detours, let's say, some tools of thinking in order to establish this kind of proof of value. It is difficult for Bitcoin, and it's even more difficult for things which are a bit more ethereal. So tokenization and using things on blockchain practically means that there is a digital object, and this digital object is, or let's say, might be linked to some reference to the physical world, some backing, some proof, or some promise, something. It can be bananas, which are digitalized, money, some pieces of commodity, of course. They're always traditional gold. And this barrier between the worlds mean there is no direct way to assess or to establish the proof that there is value in a token. That is a question which has been asked many times, and there is no sufficient answer. Of course, you can establish a sensor somewhere in the real world which reports to the blockchain in regular intervals. Some of these sensors have been known as oracles, but nonetheless, the sensor is in the real world, so it needs real world maintenance, and that's not a viable solution. Classical problem. Having a token, which just by coincidence is named T, and this token has an alleged backing in US dollars, might be a stash of physical banknotes or be on a bank account, doesn't matter, but the point is it's just in a different world, in the physical world, which means outside of blockchain. And the link in between, how does a token holder really know that there is money being reserved, being used as or utilized as a backing for the token? No idea. Practically, you have to believe somebody that it's true because that person says so. As I said in the beginning, I'm an engineer, so I don't like to believe somebody, I want to check. And the best way to get proof is to have a third party, credible third party, which does the assessment and which creates a certificate that says that there is indeed some backing. That is something which is done in the physical world today anyway. So if there isn't the chance that you can just walk into a vault and count the money yourself, there are limits to the desire to assess everything yourself. So if you just can't walk into a vault, then the next best thing is to get this proof from a credible and competent third party. And this is, of course, important. So you can get proof from different parties too. If the party is an idiot, then the proof will be as will have little reliability and little credibility. Now, sorry, wrong direction. So now, why is it important to establish this proof, not just in the physical world, but also in the digital world? See, if you have a digital item like a token and physical backing in the real world, if the proof is just anchored in the real world too, then again the question arises, where's the link? Of course, the auditor could put into his audit report a link saying, I hereby also witness that the token with address whatever has the before mentioned asset backing. There's just a problem. Most auditors only know their business. In other words, they know how to count money and how to certify the amount which they find in the vault, but they don't know much about blockchain technology. Furthermore, they won't take the risk that an investor will sue them. In recent months, the amounts which are in question have amassed into the billions and even trillions now. So it's kind of a risk to just certify something which you don't understand much about. So either this party simply refuses to also create the link in its certification, or it will cost a significant amount of money because you need very rare specialists. And still, the linkage would be just a text and nothing else. Now, there is an alternative, and this alternative is to use blockchain for its purpose to create either a digital twin of the document in the same way as you can create digital twins of any other asset, or just record the document on blockchain right away. And there is even a very important analogy to the most important feature of such a certification. And this important feature is the signature. So on a real world certification, you have handwritten signature. And on the document on blockchain, you have a cryptographically signed, cryptographically secured signature. I don't want to go too much into the details because it's a lot of mathematics there, but nonetheless, a cryptographic signature is much more secure than a handwritten signature. You can't just copy it. It is always a function of the signed text. So every individual document will have a differently, so another signature, but still being signed by the proper private key. The big advantage is the one who signs does not have to hand out his private key to somebody else, but everybody can just verify that the signature is valid. These documents on blockchain are not different anyway to the assets which already existed. So you can either have a token or a document, and they practically look the same. The features are having a unique ID. Both of them are unique, and each of them having a signature. Both signatures practically mean that this document, this artifact on blockchain is being created or being called into existence. Then the timestamp when this occurred is also recorded, and there is no way that this can be forged. And of course, attached, there is a bunch of data. And if you put both things together, the big advantage of having such a digital representation on blockchain of this proof is that you can create not just a soft link, not just a reference by somebody in the real world to the digital world, but you can create a so-called hard link between those two assets. One asset is the document, the other asset is the token. And of course, it is a real life person recording it, but nonetheless, the proof is on chain thereby. And the linkage is on chain together with timestamp and all these different properties. Now, this linkage can be extended. There is no reason why it should just be one document which is linked. It can be many. It can be the original document describing the asset altogether. That can be me, who is the issuer of this asset, of this token, who records the initial data. Then there can be a notary creating all additional proof. And of course, there can be auditors, always the same or different parties, creating annually reports about the asset backing and so forth. There is the slogan, which has become known as the slogan of Bitcoin, which is vires in numeris, and that is exactly the same when creating proof on blockchain. There is no limit as to how many tokens and as to how many documents can be linked with a single asset. It's just improving the credibility with every single one. And that's already the advantage. So if you compare the status quo, let's say a gold token where somebody claims there is asset backing and that one should trust him and his white paper that there is indeed value which backs the token. When you compare this to the possibility of having a token directly linked on blockchain with its various documents and audits and so forth, all this being cryptographically safe, having an audit trail which just comes automatically with every record on blockchain because there is the unforgeable timestamp, then you see the advantage. And to put all this in a nutshell, I already mentioned it in the very beginning that there is practically no magic, no secret which allows to prove something in the real world and link this to the digital world. So the digital world cannot reach out to the physical world and just record something. Everything which would be delivered by sensors still needs physical existence. So in other words, a maintenance engineer to make sure that the sensor works correctly, or again, an auditor proving that the sensor works correctly. So that is not the solution. But by linking documents on chain, you have the advantage of these unique IDs, the unforgeable timestamp, signature, and data, which can be combined to boost the credibility. And then since the whole process is just driven by mathematics, it's also practically simple and cheap. Normally, audit reports are prepared by companies, mostly expensive ones, and it's just one audit report per year. You can do small proofs in smaller time steps and time intervals, just boost the credibilities. So why not, or why limit to just one expensive report? You can have numerous ones, but deeper ones being done in regular intervals, which just prove by the chain of events that there is value behind. So that practically is all I wanted to say today. So about documents on chain and putting the proof on chain. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm eagerly awaiting your questions if you have any. So first question is in. I thought the benefits of blockchain were that it was a trustless digital alternative that removed middlemen. You just said that it still needs a credible real person to make the assessment and to ensure that what gets tokenized is legitimate. So where is the advantage with blockchain? Well, actually, as I said, there is no magic which would create any insight from blockchain into the physical world. And unless the token is entirely digital, something like an NFT for a game item, so the NFT is digital, the game item is digital, there is no way to really make sure that the link is established. And if you can't establish a link natively, like digital to digital, so if you have this bridge between real world and digital world, there is no other way than to introduce some kind of middleman. The advantage of not needing middlemen comes from concepts like Bitcoin, which works absolutely perfect, but keep in mind Bitcoin is digital to digital. And the credibility which is established there is credibility in the transaction. You don't need any party to witness that transactions have happened. So the protocol itself makes sure that the transaction happens. There is no rollback or no kind of fraud in that sense that somebody says, I'm giving you some Bitcoins, but actually he does not. So once it's recorded, it's recorded. There is no way to roll that back. And in the same way, we use the feature of no rollback of recording data having an exact timestamp and fingerprint of the data, which means you can't change it later. Example, somebody writing a white paper which has a number of claims. I mean, nobody practically read white papers in 2017 and 18, and I think still today nobody reads white papers. And in such a environment, fraud is easy. You publish a white paper with certain claims, you change it later when the project fails, and nobody would have any proof what was written in advance, because normally white papers are written in such a way that it attracts a large audience, whether people read it or not. And if these are changed later, bad luck if you want to claim that some fraud has happened. And this is where documents on blockchain help you. That if they are recorded, there is no way that they are changed later. They can be adapted, of course, but there is an audit trail, there's proof that they have been changed. This is the big advantage. So next question, can just anyone link documents to an asset? What happens if the link document contains something malicious or even fraudulent? That is indeed possible. So linkage between documents is, or let me start differently. If you record data on blockchain, and if that is not a permissioned blockchain with limited read or write permissions, then you can record whatever you want. So there is no limitation as towards what you record and what you say. Practically speaking, that's true, but there's also the legal aspect of it. So if there is some defamation being linked with a token, there is, of course, same as in the physical world, the chance that there is a lawsuit following. And this is one thing. And on the other hand, of course, there is a lot of data generated anyway on blockchain, off-chain, and how the world, or the way the world learned to cope with it, is by just creating filters. And that's exactly the same what would happen. So normally credible parties are identified by their credible address. In other words, you know that a certain address is the address of a lawyer or of an auditor and this and that, and addresses which you don't know can just ignore, same as spam. So in the same way as spam happens in the real world, in our emails daily, such spam can also happen on blockchain, and the mitigation is quite the same. Next question, is the data really recorded on chain? I was waiting for that question. Doesn't this mean it is visible to everyone? So first of all, the data record itself is indeed visible to everyone. But I was not saying that the entire data is recorded on chain. That would be, in most circumstances, also a breach of privacy. Sure, with stable coins and other pegged, and not only pegged, but allegedly asset-backed tokens, it would be beneficial to see it, but practically all you need on chain is just the timestamp when it happened, the unique ID, and something we refer to as the fingerprint of the data. The fingerprint of the data is something like a checksum, not something, but it is a checksum of a file. And because the data can be arbitrarily long, even gigabytes, it wouldn't even make sense to record that on blockchain firsthand. It doesn't fit there. Well, maybe it fits, but it costs a fortune. So the only way to do this is just to record the checksum and store the data off chain. And whenever you need to prove that this data is authentic, you just pull up the checksum, compare it with the file which you have, and if it matches, you have the right file. And this file can even be stored decentrally. It can be put on IPFS, the interplanetary file system, and many different locations, even at once. So there's no preferred place where you can put the file. It's practically a revision-proof storage. Then Next question, why is the unique ID so important? Well, this is indeed the key question. So when you create files in the real world, how often did it happen that you have conflicting file names? Normally there is a system behind, like you have a date counter, whatever, something like this, to make sure that documents are unique. But this is then just a file system of a single person. If many persons work on the same system, if there is even no restriction as how many people work there and who accesses it and who puts data there. Remember the question before, can everyone record data? Yes, practically yes. So there is no file naming convention. There wouldn't be any guarantee that files are unique. The only way to make sure they are unique is by giving them a unique ID. That is something blockchain just knows from its very early steps, so from its birth, to give and to attribute unique IDs to items. And thereby, if there is a link from one asset ID or one document ID to another document ID, then you know exactly which documents or assets or unique items are affected. There is no way there can be doubt. This is the advantage of the unique ID. And yes, the question I already implicitly answered. Wouldn't all this cost a lot of gas or money? It depends. So most likely the one who asked the question is referring to the Ethereum mainnet, which has become pretty expensive in recent months and years. So recording data on chain, as I said before, only needs the entry which establishes proof, like an anchor, which points to the real world, or to another location where the bulk data is stored. But the point here is it doesn't have to be the same blockchain where the asset is stored. It just needs a reference, which is in this sense unique, making sure that there is that the pointer between the asset and the document is also unique. So you could use a low-cost blockchain or a side chain or whatever solution you have at hand in order to create this linkage. Good. Now I think we come to the end. The last question. Is this documentation solution already in use somewhere? Well, there is the beginning of using such a concept by cross-linking documents. So next month, one of our partners will go online with a solution that provides simply documentation on chain, and just that, in order to notarize documents and allow anyone to record such notarized documents on chain. And since this is integrated with the token economy operating system, which we developed, there is already the possibility to link existing tokens with such pieces of truth. So as of today, it's not online on our platform, but it will be online soon. Good. So that was the last question. I hope you had fun and learned what you wanted to learn in the webinar. So thank you very much for your attention and have a good evening. Goodbye.